Fake HOA tried to arrest me for trespassing. They didn't know I was the sheriff. You'd be surprised how quickly someone can ruin a sunny Saturday with a clipboard and a badge that isn't even real. I was standing on my brother's freshly poured driveway. He was out of town. Asked me to check on the place when three people in knockoff uniforms rolled up in a golf cart labeled HOA enforcement. I barely had time to wave before they jumped out like I was some career criminal. Step away from the property, barked a woman in mirrored sunglasses. You're trespassing. This house is under HOA security review. I blinked. Excuse me. She pointed a gloved finger at me. ID. Now. I smiled calmly, reached for my badge, and said, Sheriff Miles Garner. I'm here legally. That's when things spiraled. I'd only just gotten used to the stillness of Pine Brook trails, a planned community buried between woods and winding cul-de-sacs. My little brother Nate had recently moved here, quiet guy, teaches high school biology, doesn't make waves. When he left for a 2-week field trip with his students, I agreed to check on the place. His new house had just been painted, and a few packages needed collecting. No big deal. The neighborhood looked like it had been plucked from a home design catalog. Trimmed lawns, white fences, clean porches, but underneath it all, there was a strange order. Too much order, even for someone like me. Back home, I was used to dealing with chaos meth labs in cornfields, fights outside bars, domestic calls gone sideways. But here, everything was polished, choreographed. And that Saturday morning, the stage was set for something uglier than it looked. When Karen, yes, she introduced herself, refused to accept my badge. I knew we weren't dealing with any official HOA. No legal HOA has the power to detain someone, and certainly not with zip ties and a clipboard full of photocopied violations. Badge doesn't mean squat if you're trespassing on private property, she snapped, motioning to the other two goons to secure the perimeter. One of them actually reached for his belt like he had a weapon. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you stop before you commit a felony. I said. She laughed. Who do you think you are, sheriff? County. Elected. She squinted, her bravado faltering for half a second, but then she doubled down. We don't recognize that authority here. This is a private community. That was the moment I realized something was deeply wrong in Pine Brook. They tried to zip tie me. I didn't escalate. I didn't touch my weapon. I just called it in. Dispatch. This is Garner. I've got 3 individuals impersonating law enforcement in Pine Brook trails. Send backup. Potential citizens arrest in progress. On a sheriff. 10 minutes later, sirens sliced through the air. Karen turned ghost white as real deputies arrived. Guns holstered but hands ready. The HOA enforcers backed off, but not before Karen muttered, This isn't over. We have rules. You're breaking protocol. That would have been the end. But it wasn't, because what I uncovered next blew the lid off Pine Brook. Turns out, Pine Brook Trails didn't have a registered HOA. The HOA was a fake committee started by Karen McDougal and her boyfriend, a former security contractor. They printed uniforms, handed out citations, charged compliance fees directly to residents' Venmo accounts. Worse, they had installed unauthorized surveillance equipment on light poles and collected personal data on rule breakers. Veterans flying flags, teens with too loud cars, mixed-race couples, renters. Over a dozen residents had been fined, harassed, and even forced to sell. They'd intimidated elderly neighbors into signing waivers, all under the banner of neighborhood order. What Pine Brook thought was structure was tyranny. I started knocking on doors, quietly, carefully. Mrs. Eldridge, 74, told me she was threatened with a lien for planting the wrong kind of roses. A young black couple was issued warnings for unregistered presence. A wheelchair ramp was removed from a disabled vet's home because it violated visual harmony. It made my blood boil. This wasn't code enforcement, it was organized bullying, and it was spreading. I looped in county legal. I brought in the inspector general. We combed through the paperwork and found none, just a fake charter with a signature from Karen herself. But I needed more than evidence. I needed voices. So I asked people to come forward. And they did. The town meeting was packed. Karen tried to bar me from speaking. She tried to shout over me. But when I showed the footage of her trying to cuff me and of her screaming that the county sheriff didn't count, she fell silent. Then came the testimonies. Mothers, teachers, veterans, elderly residents shaking with emotion, all silenced, fined, or forced to comply with absurd codes made up on the spot. The public reaction was explosive. News vans, hashtags, legal filings. Karen's smug little empire collapsed like a rotted fence post. But the real shift came later. Karen and her fake task force were arrested for impersonating public officials, unlawful surveillance, extortion, and discrimination. And the residents, they voted to install a legitimate community board with elections, term limits, and oversight. They asked me to swear in the new board chair myself. That day, I walked into the same clubhouse where I'd been zip-tied and handed a golden gavel to a young woman named Anna, who'd been the first to speak up about Karen's abuses. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. People assume small crimes don't matter in rich neighborhoods, but what happened in Pinebrook proves otherwise. Power, when unchecked, rots. Even behind white fences and perfect lawns. I didn't just walk onto my brother's driveway that day. I walked into a war for dignity disguised as order. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The end.